Day 1152 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzie here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 941,000 military personnel losses, representing an additional 950 in the past day. Then as for hardware, 1 tank, 5 APVs and 49 artillery. Now, as for those infantry fighting vehicles and armoured personnel carriers, there's been a decline in losses reported for Russia's production vehicles in battle, as opposed to their older stockpiles, with production vehicles down to an all-time low, accounting for 15% of losses in the battlefield. Also noting that what counts as newer production vehicles includes upgraded protection kits on older armor. And with this research also suggesting the inclusion of infantry mobility vehicles as part of these datasets. But as a brief summary, in light of these low values, it looks like new equipment is not considered cost-effective for the Russian army, given all the extra work and funding that goes into them, only to have a low chance of survival within, say, 60 minutes of any frontline assault operation. As such, the data strongly indicates a change in tactics for the Russian military, as no country at war would willingly downgrade production unless the costs didn't add up for them. Then headed to the map, because just as Easter was arriving in Ukraine, so too arrived an almost last-minute Kremlin-proposed 30-hour ceasefire, set to begin last night at 1800 hours. This announcement came with familiar rhetoric about showing whether the Kyiv regime was ready for negotiations. But what was the outcome to this proposal or ceasefire? Well, there wasn't much of a ceasefire to speak of, with the reality on the ground telling a different story. And to start from the top, just 5 minutes before the ceasefire was to begin, Russian forces attacked a residential building in Kherson. And then as night fell, on what was supposed to be a peaceful Easter Eve, battlefield reports revealed the hollow nature of Moscow's promise. By 10 p.m, Russian forces had already carried out at least 35 assaults across Ukrainian territory, plus an additional 8+ attacks in Russia's own Kursk region, where Ukrainian forces hold positions. After that, Easter Sunday morning brought no respite, with 59 instances of Russian shelling and 5 assaults recorded by 6 a.m. Just before these events, President Zelensky responded with a measured follow-up proposal, offering to extend the ceasefire from 30 hours to 30 days if Russia genuinely wanted to stop the fighting, where he also went on to state that 30 hours is enough for headlines, but not for true trust-enforcing exercises. Nonetheless, the word went out about the ceasefire to the AFU brigades, but the Kremlin proposal failed to stick from the Russian side. Ukrainian forces had then continued responding based on the specific combat situation at hand, and while a few areas along the vast front line were reported as quieter, and by that I mean smaller scale harassment attacks by Russian forces rather than major offensives, the promised silence had never materialized, as it appears that this Easter truce was merely a Kremlin PR operation aimed at Western audiences with zero substance, seemingly using the ceasefire announcement as an attempt to gain a quick, decisive advantage on the battlefield, a military cheat, if you will, with Russia since claiming, naturally, that Ukrainian ceasefire violations occurred, as did Ukraine to Russia. Most interestingly, 1 hour and 14 minutes before the ceasefire, you can see a Russia state-owned news outlet RIA Novosti reported on the Easter truce, but then 1 minute later had reported that all 6 Russian main combined arms armies were attacking in 11 directions. Go figure, not a well-timed comment. Then headed across on the map to Russia's Krasnodar region for a moment, as a massive police and military manhunt unfolded in the region overnight. It was reported that around 100 Russian soldiers attempted to escape from a military unit. Their soldiers, detained for going AWOL, broke through a fence, reaching the commandant's office grounds. Authorities launched a significant search, but it remains unclear if any soldiers successfully fled, though given the heightened state of alert, it suggests some might have gotten away. It's another event that goes to show how morale within their own military ranks is in the gutter. Then headed into Ukrainian Donetsk, where Russia's version of their own unilaterally declared Easter ceasefire hits Uspinivka, with Russian artillery pounding the village and nearby areas this morning as they were firing from afar. Meanwhile, just a few kilometers north, with reports of the AFU pushing back the invading forces near Udachne. Also noting that this is a settlement that's just 6 or so kilometers from the border to Dnipropetrovsk. This means that in the event that Russia were to gain a foothold in the so far untouched region, they'd likely use the captured land as a means to negotiate for keeping all of the other lands that they've previously occupied. But you can also not rule out the potential for Russian greed, where the Kremlin may then start to claim this as Russian territory as well. This speaks to the Russian mindset. If they can take it and hold it, then they'll likely want to keep it. Also, somewhere around the front Pokrovsk lines, and in fact really not close to this frontline area, because, firstly, where you may never think it's possible for the Russian army to continue to outdo themselves, but seen here was the most unusual piece of equipment used by the Russian forces to reportedly storm the front line with: an armored assault train, a locomotive completely covered with improvised armor sheets. You'll notice the flanged wheels, typical for rail vehicles, as it sits on its track, hardly maneuverable, and a slow-moving, easy target. Perhaps this was their inbound supply vehicle on top of their quick getaway or slow getaway transportation. Then headed to Kherson, where the Ukrainian military from the Spices of Odin unit destroyed the Russian electronic warfare system, the Borisoglepsk-2. Now, you may remember the Borisoglepsk EW system, though they are few and far between, and there's a reason for that, because their lower and upper cost estimate for this single vehicle on an MTLB armored vehicle frame is quite staggeringly between $78 and $200 million per unit. Now, electronic warfare could be seen as a saving throw for an army, but that only works if A, your threat library is fully up to date, and B, defense contractors that provide it are both competent and honest. Something of which many of their defense contractors could never be considered as. Also in Kherson was another of the French-supplied aviation-launched hammer-guided munitions launched by a Ukrainian MiG-29 slamming through the roof of a Russian-occupied warehouse happening around Oleshki. And in just the last 2 weeks, there's been a Frontline reported 19 high-value Russian positions struck by these hammers alone. Then briefly on the map headed up to Belgorod, as Russians in the Krasnoyarsky district tried launching an Easter assault but failed to achieve any gains, immediately becoming struck by Ukrainian fire. Then also on the map, where we come across more Russian drone nets for their main travel routes, but there is nuance, with these setups not actually including the side netting required to prevent Ukrainian FPVs getting through, like this sneaky little chap. Coming in and out of both sides of the installation, with its operator majestically controlling the quadcopter between open spaces near to the ground, weaving in and out and back in again, into the road, right before disposing of its target of choice. Then headed across to some news for today, as Ukraine and Russia completed a significant 246 for 246 prisoner exchange, marking one of the largest swaps since the onset of the conflict. Mediated by the UAE, Ukraine has secured the release of an additional 31 wounded soldiers outside of the main swap, amounting to 277 in total being returned home. This 63rd exchange since the war began saw emotional reunions with Ukrainian servicemen, including those who defended Mariupol and Snake Island, returning to their families. Meanwhile, footage of the soldiers returned to Russia was far from a cheerful and ceremonious event. Not a smile to be seen here, where voluntary surrender in Russia can see these guys receiving a 10-year prison sentence, as per amendments to the criminal code signed by the big man himself, President Vladimir Putin. So just imagine that your country sends you off to invade and capture another country to call your own, but after your surrender and return home, you're off to the gulag, all because of Putin's vanity war. To be fair, these guys probably won't be going to jail, but instead back to some of the worst positions and conditions imaginable in the SMO. Zero chance survival storm assaults. Then to a quick bite of hardware news, as the AFU is using their UAVs to drop mines that now look like logs onto enemy positions. First it was visible mines, then it was these types of mines like the PPTM anti-tank mines, wrapped in trousers to obscure the true threat, followed by a series of other clever contraptions. And now, reaching the level of something that you just might want to pick up. Then to some more hardware news that looks comparatively more technical, as the AFU is now being equipped with a frequency analyzer testing device called the REB tester, which is used to check whether an electronic warfare jammer is working correctly. Various channels are covered, with frequencies as high as 5.8 GHz already in the works for the next upgrade. As a note, jammers don't self-verify, so this device ensures their operation across specific bands as required. Seen in this image is the page 1 of covered frequencies, starting from 240 MHz, going up to 1000 MHz or so there. This reflects the AFU's growing integration of advanced technologies to enhance their frontline effectiveness. Then to a quick Russian hardware update, of a sort. Let's squeeze it in this segment, shall we? Where we saw some individuals of their army training to storm Ukrainian positions on motorbikes. Instead of regular infantry, shown here is some training concepts for motorbike riders to jump over the concertina wire into follow-through positions. How it works is one drops his bike and the rest ride over, although more elements would surely come into play than what this video suggests. Firstly, Ukrainian barbed wire is a lot thicker, wider, and has been causing all sorts of issues for Russian progression most recently. Secondly, this probably serves as a training video more than anything else, with many Russians never truly getting the sufficient training or any training at all to perform these exercises in the middle of a hot war. Which leads into thirdly, because these activities not only require extensive training, but in a coordinated effort, which takes timing and precision not afforded to new soldiers right in the middle of the fog of war. So it seems all very theoretical, but we'll wait and see if any under-trained invaders are up for the challenge and have decided who gets to go first. Then to something of a light and quick segment to round off the day with today, guys, as we have come across multiple videos now to show the festive season celebrated by Ukrainian soldiers. Deliveries of Easter cakes sent to their own frontline soldiers by way of drone drops, getting into that Easter spirit. It truly underscores the stark contrast in support and morale between both the armies. All too often a night and day difference. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks again for watching. Please continue to like, comment, subscribe, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers!